Hello everyone, here Arami Solano will discuss to you about the fluency and restructuring, which is the continuation of the how to practice the grammar. First, we have fluency. So what is fluency? Fluency is a skill. It is the ability to process language speedily and easily. Fluency is derived from the Latin word fluens, which means to flow, or it may be defined as the ability to get across communicative intent without too much hesitation and too many pauses to cause barriers or a breakdown in communication. But we will go deeper to the meaning of fluency for you to understand well and clearly. Fluency is a speech-language pathology term that means the smoothness or flow with which sounds, syllables, words, and phrases are joined together when speaking quickly. Language fluency is one of a variety of terms, including mastery and language proficiency, typically used to characterize a person's language ability, and its use is often applied to the acquisition of foreign language or another learned language. In a simplistic sense, fluency is defined as one's ability to be understood and by both native and non-native listeners. In the sense of proficiency, fluency encompasses a number of related but separable skills. First, in reading, the ability to easily read and understand texts written in the language. Writing, the ability to formulate written texts in the language. Speaking, the ability to produce speech in the language and be understood by its speakers. Listening comprehension, the ability to follow and understand speech in the language. Reading comprehension, the level of understanding of text or text messages. Studies in the assessment of creativity list fluency as one of the four primary elements in creative thinking, the others being flexibility, originality, and elaboration. Fluency in creative thinking is seen as the ability to think of many diverse ideas quickly. Fluency develops as the learner learns to automize knowledge. One way they do this is to use pre-assembled chunks of language. Chunks may be picked up as single units in much the same way as individual words are learned. Common expressions like "what's the matter" and "you know what I mean" are typically learned as chunks. Chunks may also be acquired when utterances are first assembled according to grammar rules and then later automized. Fluency activities are aimed at this process of automation. It means that chunks are ready for use at any moment and do not need reassembling every time they are used. Thus, we can also partly account for the notion of fluency, a term frequently used to describe smooth and effortless performance in a language, but one that is often only loosely defined. Ready-made language is the key to fluency. Native speakers can only speak at the speed they speak because they are calling on a vast repertoire of ready-made language in their mental lexicons. Similarly, they can listen at the speed of speech and read quickly because they are constantly recognizing used chunks. Too much attention to form may jeopardize or will fail fluency, since it tempts learners to use analyzed language rather than memorized language. One way of diverting attention away from form is to design practice tasks where the focus is primarily on meaning through the use, for example, of communicative activities such as information gap tasks. An information gap task is an activity where learners are missing the information they need to complete a task and need to talk each other to find it. Another one, the students in the classroom. Information gap activities are useful for various reasons. They provide an opportunity for extended speaking practice. They represent real communication. Motivation can be high and they require soft skills such as clarifying meaning and rephrasing. Typical types of information gap activities you might find include describe and draw, spot the difference, jigsaw, reading and listening, and split dictations. A communicative purpose might be to find something out, or to get someone to do something, or to offer to do something. It follows that the exchange is a reciprocal one. There is as much a need to listen as there is to speak. This in turn means that speakers have to be manually intelligible, that not always a condition in drill type activities. Furthermore, there is an element of the unpredictable involved. What if you don't have the answer I am looking for? Or you refuse my request? Or you reject my offer? All these elements, the purposefulness, reciprocity, mutual intelligibility, and unpredictability, are features of real-life communication. Classroom tasks that incorporate these features are known as communicative tasks and help prepare students for the cut and thrust of real communication. But more than that, because they are message focused, they serve to shift the learner's attention away from a concern for form, and in this way, they help develop fluency. To summarize, where fluency is the goal, practice activities should have these characteristics. First, attention to meaning. That means the practice activity should encourage learners to pay attention less to the form of what they are saying, or which may slow them down, and more to the meaning. Next is authenticity. The activity should attempt to simulate the psychological conditions of real-life language use. That is, the learner should be producing and interpreting language under real constraints and with a measure of unpredictability. Next, communicative purpose is to help meet these last two conditions. The activity should have a communicative purpose. That is, there should be a built-in need to interact. Next, chunking. At least some of the language the learners are practicing should be in the form of short, memorizable chunks which can be automized. Lastly, the repetition. For automation to occur, the practice activity should have an element of built-in reception so that learners produce a high volume of the targeted forms. Okay, let's move on to another one, which is restructuring. So what is it? Okay, so restructuring involves integrating new information into old. Traditionally, restructuring was meant to happen at the presentation stage. It is mean that it is a cognitive process in which the previously acquired information that has been somehow stored in separate categories is integrated, and this integration expands the learner's competence. One schools of thought argues that communicative activities such as information gap tasks provide a fertile site for restructuring. This is because such activities problematize learning. What if you don't understand my question? Or I don't understand your answer? This communication breakdown forces the learner to take stock and rethink. In turn, it offers the potential to negotiation. Negotiation of meaning, the collaborative work done to make the message comprehensible, is thought to trigger restructuring. In fact, some early proponents of the communicative approach considered that this was all that was necessary for language acquisition takes place. Restructuring is sometimes experienced by learners as a kind of flash of understanding, but more often and less dramatically, it is the dawning realization that they have moved up another notch in terms of their command of the language. So next, the practice activities designed to aid restructuring might have these characteristics. First, we have problematizing. It means having to deal with a problem often seems to trigger restructuring. For example, when learners are out in a situation where the message they are trying to convey is misinterpreted, they may be forced to assess their grasp of a rule. Moreover, the input they get as they negotiate the meaning of what they are trying to express may also help reorganize the state of their mental grammar. We have second, push. The activity should push learners to outperform their competence, that is, to produce or understand language that is a notch more complex than they would normally produce or understand. And lastly, scaffolding. There should be sufficient support or scaffolding to provide the security to take risks with the language. This means the practice activity should try to balance the new with the familiar. Scaffolding could, for example, take the form or telling a familiar story but from a different perspective. Teachers often provide students with scaffolding in the way they interact with them, repeating, rephrasing, or expanding what they are saying in order to carry a conversation. So few practice tasks, whether their objective is accuracy, fluency, or restructuring, are likely to meet all of the criteria listed above. On the other hand, some tasks may incorporate features that suit them to more than one objective. For example, both fluency and accuracy. Not all learners will respond in the same way to the same activity. Differences in ability, learning style, and motivation will affect the degree to which they engage with the task. This suggests that teachers need to be familiar with a fairly wide repertoire of practice activities. It also suggests that time spent in presenting new language should not be at the expense of time that could be spent on providing a useful variety of practice activities. So that's all my report for today. Thank you.